Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to all the people who help support the creation and production of this podcast through their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. So we are talking about the High Republic Adventures, which is the Dark Horse comic series written by Daniel Jose Older. In particular, we have been talking about Phase 2 storytelling. So there were 8 issues released for the Phase 2 storytelling part. And we talked about the first 4 issues yesterday. We're going to talk about the second 4 issues today. This is a full spoiler podcast, so there's your warning right there. These have been out for a while, so I think it's okay, right? So where we left the story, we have the Battle of Jedha has broken out, and the heroes and the villains have just arrived at Jedha. The villains are there because they are secretly working with the Graf family to sow chaos on Jedha to try to help scuttle the peace deal between the planets of Irem and Arano. This is part of our first of our patented 7 takeaway breakdown points, and Sav is with the Dank Graks, or at least most of them, thinking that they have Maz Kanata stashed somewhere and she's just kind of along for the ride to Jedha, and yet she still thinks, like, she has a sense that maybe the Dank Graks are onto her, but maybe not. But there's this other Dank Grak named Saya who is of a similar age group as Sav, and maybe trying to make friends at that level. So they're on the ground in the midst of the chaos. Sav doesn't necessarily want to be fighting anyone, but Saya certainly is getting involved in the fray because that's what the Dank Graks are there to do. Meanwhile, for our second takeaway, we have our heroes, the pirate crew, being led by Dexter Jettster at this point because Maz is not there. And in the midst of the chaos that's happening and them trying to possibly find where Maz could be on this planet and trying to keep themselves safe, there are conversations that are happening, like somebody asks Dex what his relationship is like with Maz, and Dex has to say it's kind of a relationship beyond words, but definitely sounds like they're a thing, but they're not an exclusive thing, but it's beyond what any kind of normal thing is. That's kind of fascinating, the way that it is dealt with. So the person who's asking is this person, Alak, who's part of the pirate crew. And Alak has a thing going on with Raf. Raf is the pirate hunter we were talking about in the previous episode. And it is one of those, like, they're from the opposite sides of the tracks, but, something's working for them and they don't necessarily know how they're going to deal with it. They've been, having conversations even as Raf is, trying to work for this, galactic anti-pirate authority, and as Alak is working with Maz Kanata's crew. But as long as, like, they have public conversations where the crew knows that Alak is not giving away any secrets to Raf, then everybody's kind of cool with it. So they're down on the ground in Jedha, and there's a mention of enlightenment, which is fun. That, of course, is the tap bar that features prominently in George Mann's Tales from Enlightenment stories in Star Wars Insider magazine. Salandra Show makes a brief appearance, no words, just shows up in the middle of a fight, basically. And also in these stories is Therm Scissorpunch, who showed up in Solo: A Star Wars Story. Therm apparently has been selling, a bad bill of goods about himself. There's a whole bunch of stuff he claims to have done that he hasn't really done, and he's very fearful. But then in the middle of the rioting and to help defend his crewmates, enters the Therm state and just kind of goes berserk, basically. That's where Salandra Show shows up and is putting an end to a bunch of chaos, and Therm is in the middle of that. For a third takeaway, we find out that the Dank Graks, who, as I mentioned yesterday, like, apparently all of them have come from other Force cults, like, that they basically abandoned and signed up with the Dank Graks or whatever. We find out that they are also working with the Path of the Open Hand through Saya, which is pretty fun. Saya refers to the Path of the Open Hand as weirdos and tells Sav, who doesn't really know anything about the Path, that their whole thing is that they, don't like Force users, think, that they should never be using the Force. That's something we've talked about in previous Phase 2 conversations. And Sav is like, well, that's strange and weird. And Saya's take on this is that it's also, hypocritical and annoying because the Path should know that the Dank Graks are actually comprised of Force users. And so the fact that they are working directly with Force users as opposed to not having anything to do with them because they think nobody should be doing that is, not a good thing and not a congruent thing. For our fourth takeaway, Sav finally figures out that there's something else going on because Maz doesn't seem to be anywhere and thinks that Saya is hiding something, and so presses Saya, and Saya says Maz is being held on some Irem military cruiser and gets Sav to fly to the military cruiser and has to go through the war zone of their ships, the Irem and Aranos ships fighting against each other. Manages to get onto the cruiser and finds out that it was a ruse, and Sav kind of suspected it was a ruse, but there was no choice but to at least follow it through. And it turns out that the ruse was meant because they knew, the Dank Graks did, that Sav really was in fact a Jedi, and they needed to distract her long enough so that the leader of the Dank Graks could actually do what he really wanted to do, which was go back to Takodana with Maz Kanata as a captive and say, look, I have her captive. I'm the new head of operations on Takodana now. So for our fifth point of the story, everybody in Maz Kanata's crew, along with Sav, who reunites with the crew, they head back to Takodana, but they've got to hide. We find out that the pirates who didn't want to have anything to do with the Dank Graks, they fled into the forest, and there's a guy named Bumblehead who ends up sort of leading this group and gets everybody into safety once they arrive. Like our heroes are shot at as they're arriving on Takodana, getting near the castle, and are shot down, but they are able to escape droids and other dangers in the forest and get into cover. But the unfortunate thing is that at least the Jedi Master of Sav's will not help. Jedi Master says, we're neutral, we're not sticking our nose into any of this, so the Jedi aren't going to be any help. It's only the pirates who are going to be able to do something about it, but the pirates don't seem to want to act very quickly on things, and Sav is well, they're just going to get dug in more, we have to act now. So similar to how Sav would leave the Jedi Temple at night after curfew and just sneak off on her own, she does the same thing here, sneaks off on her own to head to Maz's castle to see if she can handle things herself. And for a sixth takeaway, I'll flag a brief conversation that Dexter Jetster has with Sav, which is really a beautiful little emotional moment where he says, when you think that you're very powerful, and you are very powerful, you kind of get the idea that it's your job to take on the whole galaxy, but you really need to understand that nobody can do that. The galaxy's too big, you can't take it on alone. And that's advice. It's almost as if Dex knows that she's going to pull a stunt like this, but falls on deaf ears at the moment. And so she shows up at the castle, and wouldn't you know it, they were kind of expecting her, and she gets captured. Now, there was a little thing that happened on Jedha where, in order to maintain her cover, the pirate hunter had also shown up on Jedha, and the pirate hunter has some kind of hound that got recognized by Sav, and so that her cover wouldn't be blown with Saya, she created a situation where they got separated from the pirate hunter, and Sav was able to give her lightsaber to this dog and send the dog back to the pirate hunter. The pirate hunter was like, oh my gosh, this is an incredible gesture of trust. I don't know if I've been acting, with enough integrity to be able to have earned that trust, but I guess I'm gonna have to try to earn it. And you need to know that for the final point, which is that Raph has also been captured by the Dank Graks, but because Sav's lightsaber is a double-bladed lightsaber that, snaps in half, Raph made it so that only one half of the lightsaber got confiscated by the Dank Graks, which means that the dog actually had the other half of the lightsaber. And so now, with a lightsaber, Sav is able to go and break out and finally confront the leader of the Dank Graks in a lightsaber battle. And that leader also happens to be Geonosian, so it's kind of a crazy fight because he's flying around and whatnot. But she's able to get the best of him eventually. And then the cavalry shows up to the rescue because it turns out that the master of the temple on Takodana was not really the one who was kind of leading things at the temple. It turned out that another Jedi had actually gone undercover with the Dank Graks to find out more about what they were doing and what they were up to. It also happens to be a more senior Jedi who had been at the Takodana temple, and it's an all's well that ends well situation because Sav had not been necessarily feeling seen as a Jedi and was hoping for a different master, this master that turned out to have been undercover all along. And once her current master decides, yeah, I think I need some time away from the Jedi Order, the other master, Tara Sanoob, says, hey, you're going to need a new master, Sav. Can I be your master? And Sav is like all about it. That's exactly what she wanted in the first place. So kind of gives her a chance to be both a Padawan and a pirate, basically, which makes her feel really awesome. And that is basically the big story that happens with Sav Malagon during the High Republic adventures in Phase 2 of the High Republic Storytelling Initiative. And that then means that we've reached the end of the podcast for today. If you enjoy this Daily Dose of Star Wars Joy, please consider doing these 3 simple things if you haven't done them already. One of them is leaving a rating or review on your favorite app. One of them is hitting a join or a follow or a subscribe or a like button to make sure you get notifications about when this podcast is coming out. These are signals that tell the app of your choice that, hey, this is worth showing to other people who might be interested in Star Wars podcasts. And then there's also just telling other Star Wars friends that you know that this Daily Dose of Star Wars Joy exists for them. And last but not least, you too can help support the creation and production of this Daily Dose of Star Wars Joy, which goes out to, or has gone out to, something on the order of 160 countries. It's kind of insane, really, for a one-man production, but yeah, it's there. And you can do that and learn more about it at patreon.com/SW7X7. And so it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyrighted by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.